So welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to this town hall. Willie.
Real quick,
Yes.
unfortunately, I've got 2 meetings scheduled at once. So I've delayed my next meeting till 3:30 to do a presentation. So is that okay if I can hang out for a half hour here? Kind of get the meat of it?
Yes, and we'll get you started. I'll get you right out of the starting blocks here. I was just going to introduce us and get going, and then let you say a few words about CPSO and stuff.
Okay.
So in general, the reason I wanted to have this meeting is that I feel like we've never really had a very good communication strategy between the campus and the various offices that support our work and research. So oftentimes we would be not really know. I mean, we know that EH&S has to come in and check eye washes all the time or something like that, but we didn't really have any sense for when they would be there or how we might communicate. And like I was just saying, with COVID times now, we've sort of very painstakingly scheduled everyone out. And it's becoming clear that sometimes people are feeling disturbed when somebody comes in because they were hoping to be in that room by themselves for several hours to do an experiment. And the whole pandemic has just sort of exacerbated the problem. So we thought now is a good time to talk about this, and also maybe to reset the conversation so that we just have better communications amongst all these offices and the faculty and students in general. I think we'll all be better off for that. So I think I know everyone, but for those of you that don't know me, I'm Jason Petrovsky. I'm the interim vice president for research and grad studies. I'm also a professor in the biology department. And joining me today to talk with you are Jeff Rook, the director of environmental health and safety, Scott Jacqua, the assistant director for EHS, Lindsay Henderson, she's our laboratory safety specialist from EHS, and Willie Halliburton, the chief of campus public safety, and Heather Randall, the director of facilities and property management. And essentially, these offices, we rely on their services and their support so that we can do our work. And they take great pride in making sure that they're offering good services to us. But the campus is such a large, decentralized place that oftentimes we find ourselves, our activities sometimes cross purposes. And so we're just trying to figure out how to not have that happen. And hopefully to create better communication strategies between faculty, students, and support offices, and also to launch this new program for having contact information on doors so that CPSO or EHS knows exactly who to call if they need access or if there's an emergency or something like that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Willie, let you say a few words about CPSO and your thoughts on this, and go from there. Thanks, Willie.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. For those I haven't met, my name is Willie Halliburton. I am the chief of police and also director of campus public safety here at PSU. I've been in this capacity for a little over 2 months. Feels like 2 years, but it's only been 2 months. There's a lot going on, but I'm excited for my duties. I'm excited to be working as a chief. As far as this meeting right here with the research spaces, I think it's very important. Number one, we at CPSO are the first responders to any call on campus. So we are getting calls to different buildings and spaces around the campus here. And unfortunately, during the COVID, those spaces have been empty for months, weeks and sometimes months at a time. And there may be a space that's been compromised. We get the right report, but there's no contact with the people who owns the space or uses the space. So I think this is a great effort right now to make some communication strategy so we can get a hold of folks that are working those spaces and let them know that there has been a crime, there's been graffiti, there's been something going on there. And most important, what I think is important is that we have information to our officers who are entering those spaces, because we don't know what we're going into. It may be a research lab with some kind of a chemical that you guys are experimenting with that we have no idea that is in there. And not only that, if someone had broken into that space and spilled those chemicals, we're walking into it. So I think this is extremely important to get that communication avenue set so that we can move forward in a safe manner.
All right, great. Thank you, Willie. And if anybody wants to ask questions of Willie, we've got him here for a little bit, and then he's going to be gone in about 15, 20 minutes. So if you have any general questions about interface between CPSO and your spaces on campus, now would be the time. You can just unmute and ask, or you can type them in the chat if you want. All right. Well, then I think the next person that I would like to hand it over to is Heather Randall, to talk about facilities and property management and the ways that they may interact with us all on campus.
Thank you, Jason. I have had a little trouble with my headset today. How's my volume? Great. It's great to see you all. I am Heather Randall. I'm the Director of Facilities and Property Management, and some of you I may have interacted with in my previous role in environmental health and safety. You know, some of our priorities in facilities are the safety of our staff and the safety of building occupants. We maintain fire and life safety systems and other really critical systems that protect all of us, and also that make our buildings functional and preserve our assets. Preserving our assets is obviously another critical goal of our department. And a lot of times we have to access your spaces to do that. If there's a leak, if there's an alarm going off, it's our job to address those things. And to ensure our safety, your safety, and the preservation of your research and your equipment, your specimens, all of those things, it would be wonderful to have and establish better means of communicating with you when we have to access your spaces. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about some of the signage that EHS is planning to implement. But it's also important to recognize that there are times when we're going to have to access a space that's unscheduled, unexpected, and if we can't get a hold of someone, or if there's not time to do so, we will have to enter. So the more information that's available, posted about critical safety situations that affect your space and could affect our staff and yours, the better. And also, the more contact information we have, the better. And I appreciate Jason's story about being surprised by some of our folks, and I know that they can pop in. Much as you have a sense of ownership of your laboratories, our facilities folks have a sense of ownership of our building and campus spaces. You know, it's our jobs to take care of it. So I hope we have some mutual appreciation of that sense of ownership that we share over our campus spaces and our obligation to take care of it for you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. I think it's really important that we all look at this, these activities as realizing that we're all part of a team. I think sometimes, especially, you know, you're in a lab space or something, and maybe you've been in there for a decade, and it starts to feel like your own living room or something. But the fact of the matter is, you know, that living room, you're not the one that's in there maintaining it all. The campus is being maintained all the time, and I think it's oftentimes they come in and do their work and we don't even know they've been there and gone. And so, which is good, right? But it's, I think, really important that when we do have these interactions, they be as positive and reinforcing of all of our efforts as possible. So I'm going to turn this over now to Jeff Rook, and let him introduce the EHS staff. And they're the ones that have most of the information to talk about here today, I think.
Jason, thank you again, and to RGS for setting up the town hall, and thank you for everybody taking time today as well. As we've kind of, this has been brewing for quite some time, really needing to have clear, concise communication and being able to share that information out with everybody about the potential hazards that we have and we operate. And in a lot of cases within the research community, these are things that you work with every day. So you're very aware of those hazards, comfortable with them, and can operate safely around them. But as Willie noted, in emergency situations, when they're having to enter into a lab space, they don't know the difference between how you're labeling a chemical bottle or anything else. And the same goes for FPM's crews, where if there's a water leak in a lab, their primary concern is to really stop that as quickly as possible, because the long-term and the larger impact that it's going to have, not just to your research space, but maybe the person's research space below you, or even further down in the building, could be significant and have much more long-lasting impacts, where you now are going to have to move or stop your research. So we really want to make sure that, I'm really grateful for everybody taking the time today to do this. I'm joined today from the EHS staff. Scott Jocko is the Assistant Director for Environmental Health and Safety and the Radiation Safety Officer for the university, and Lindsay Henderson, who is our Laboratory Safety Specialist and has spearheaded a lot of the information that we're going to be covering today, and is also our Biosafety Officer as well. So again, environmental health and safety is really here to provide that ongoing support to improve safety for all of the occupants of our buildings. We want to ensure that research is able to be able to go forward, to flourish, and to also make sure that anybody else that comes into the building is going to be safe as well. Our department handles all the safety features across campus, just shy of 400, eye wash stations and showers across campus. We take care of emergency spill kits, AEDs, and we also handle all of the hazardous wastes across campus as well, whatever is collected and disposed of. So, and aside from that, environmental health and safety is also the primary contact point for all the regulatory agencies that are out there, so that we don't individually burden you with having to deal with them. Specifically, what I'm referring to are OSHA, DEA, DEQ, Portland Fire Bureau, National Radiation Commission. I mean, the acronym of acronyms of regulatory agencies is pretty broad, but we're here to ensure that those compliance-related issues are being met. And again, back to the point of this town hall is really around being able to properly communicate that information out. So again, that's what we're going to kind of dive into. Scott, if you want to share the screen so that we can bring up the information. Now, a lot of this actually started a few months ago, as Willie noted, that we were having break-ins occur in different buildings on campus, and with so few people on campus, the normal methods and ways we were operating weren't able to occur. As many people aren't in the buildings, and so there's a higher risk and probability for people wanting to do something inappropriate. So we'll jump to the next slide, Scott. So first off, the laboratory and creative space signage was originally designed in the campus's chemical hygiene committee. The idea is to properly notify individuals, both in the research community and not in the research community, of the potential for hazards that are present within that space. Again, as a researcher, you know the chemicals that you're going to be working with, or the materials that you're going to be working with, so you have a more intimate knowledge of that. But for that CPSO officer, for the FPM plumber that's going to walk in there to take care of a different issue or incident, we need to make sure that we're clearly identifying what hazards are present for them. So we're asking that there's a Google form that is going to be going out after this meeting. There's one actually was done prior to this meeting, but we'll make sure it goes out again. All PIs are asked to complete that Google form for the door placards. It's a pretty simple, straightforward form. We'll see it in just a minute, where you just check boxes and enter information of what's present in this space. From there, we'll complete environmental health and safety. We'll complete the door signage, and we will deploy them as well. So really the upfront burden is upon each individual PI, and we ask that you do complete that. And we're asking if you can complete that before December 1st. That way, starting December 1, we will start deploying those across campus. for all research and creative spaces where there's the presence of chemicals or other potential hazards. So let's jump to the next slide. Lindsay, if you want to take this one away.
Thanks, Jeff. This might be a little bit repetitive since I think Jeff just covered a little bit of this, but first of all, I just wanted to thank everyone who has filled out one of these forms already, one or more of the forms. If you are a PI or a faculty member or even staff responsible for a space, I believe you needed to RSVP through this form in order to complete the registration. Ideally, we will have one of these forms filled out for each space that you are responsible for. So if you occupy 2 rooms, you would need to go back and fill out this form twice, just so that we can make sure that the hazard information collected is as accurate as possible for each room. So the link to this form is going to be distributed to departments, I believe, sometime after this meeting, hopefully sooner than later, so we can start to collect that information and get it as accurate as possible for all of the science, engineering, and art buildings. Next slide, please. So this is an example of what the lab door placards are going to look like. These signs were discussed and approved by our campus chemical hygiene committee. Other universities' versions of these signs we were considered and looked at, and we kind of created these signs based on what we thought our needs were and feel that these really fit the needs of the PSU community. This particular sign, this example anyways, has a quite large list of potential hazards. As you can see, almost all of the hazards are listed. You may note that the information on these signs is exactly what is on the Google form. So we're just going to collect that information, just plug it into these fillable PDFs to create them individually for your spaces. And if you don't have a hazard in your space, you don't need to fill out anything on the Google form. So let's say you don't have any chemicals at all in your space, but maybe you have an X-ray machine in there. All of the GHS symbols would disappear, and you would just have some notes in the other section. Next slide, please.
Hey, Lindsay, can I make a point about this?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if you're going to talk about it later. On the sheet, you have PI cell number, and I just want everyone to know that you don't necessarily have to put your cell number on there, that you can forward your office phone calls to your cell. And so if you are worried about that, just put your office number on there and have it forwarded.
I think Scott's going to talk a little bit more about that process too. So if anyone has any questions about it, he's pretty familiar with it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so these are 2 more examples of what a sign might potentially look like. We chose to simply remove the chemical hazard symbols and leave the other ones that you may have present in the exact spaces they are, in hopes that this would keep things uniform for anyone who's coming and looking at the signs and assessing the hazards really quickly. So they, compressed gases is in the same spot every time, so that once people get sort of familiar with this format, they will be able to kind of take in the hazard information if they need to respond quickly to something that's happening in the space. So one of these is for art. There may not be that many hazards on an art room potentially. If you have an IACUC protocol, we've been putting that in the other section just as a note. But yeah, so next slide, please. And so these placards were designed to fit in the smaller 8x5 display signs that are on the outside of most rooms in the science, engineering, and art buildings. If you are lucky enough to have one of the larger 8x10 signs, you are welcome to still personalize that for your lab space, however you deem necessary for your lab group. So we will just be taking up the smaller sign. I believe that's all I have. If anyone has any questions about this, I can answer them later, but thank you. And I think Jeff is coming back on.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. So the next thing that we're going to be talking about is the research in process temporary signage. So first and foremost, we are asking that all PIs complete the door placard survey first, and then afterwards, the research in process sign is meant for those temporary situations where you are going to be setting up certain conditions within a lab space that need to be maintained for a short period of time. So as an example, this would be the lights need to remain off in this space, or the lights need to remain on. It could also be that you're going to be running a prolonged water-based experiment that it needs to be flowing, or there's a sound level or noise level that needs to be maintained, or you want it, whatever those conditions are, we want to make sure that we have something else in place. Obviously, at the entry before you walk into that lab, you're going to have the door placard sign which states all the hazards. But if either you or a research assistant is doing a subset of a project that needs to have maintained a maintained condition for that short period of time, we need to have some sort of signage there. Recently, I had an opportunity to walk through most of SRTC with the Portland Fire Bureau Fire Marshal. One of the common issues and why this actually came up was the assortment of signs that we saw on doors ranged from handwritten sticky notes to more formalized typed notes, asking people to either knock before you enter or don't come in because of this or whatever. And realizing that there's that inconsistency makes it even more challenging and difficult for FPM, CPC, or CPSO, and environmental health and safety not knowing exactly what's going on, and also who put the sign up. Now, I want to also clearly state these are not meant for, oh, hey, I've got a room over here and I don't want anyone to ever enter it because this is my research space. It's not meant for long-term closing the room for any purpose. It's the conditions in this space need to be maintained for the effectiveness of my research project. And so it's an awareness piece for anybody that could be going in that is not a part of that research team. We're going to be working with FPM and CPC to make CPSO, excuse me, to make sure that they are aware of these signs and what the next step in process is. And that's why we also asked to provide an additional name and phone number for contact. It may be a duplicate for who's on the main placard for the door. If you have a lab space that has multiple side doors or smaller rooms, or it could be that you've got a research assistant that's doing something more specific. But we want to make sure that that information is posted there so that prior to our entry, we have someone that we can call that is intimately aware of what's going on in that space, what the conditions are, and what we can do to ensure that work can be still done in that location, or if it needs to be scheduled out a little bit further. Now, obviously, if it's a broken water line and FPM needs to get in there to deal with something, then we will make sure that they get in there and deal with it, because the long-term damage is going to be considerably worse. But we still want to make sure that that information is available. So if we can go to the next slide. This is the example of the sign that we're going to be utilizing, where it just says, warning, research and process. Conditions in the space are set up for that ongoing process. But again, we're asking for that emergency 24-hour contact so that the success of your research will not be impacted negatively. 24-hour contact name and email. And then the most important piece here is the lower portion, which is the dates of times that it's going to be in that state. Now, again, we're looking for something that's going to be a day or days, maybe a week or so. This is not a from January 1 to December 31st, I've got research going on, please don't come in here. It is for those short periods of time where there's going to be specific conditions that you need to have maintained so that we're aware of this, and then we can coordinate if it's a standard inspection, if it's a piece of equipment that needs to be serviced, that we can work around that. And then obviously the lower portion where it says notes is the opportunity for the PI to put a little more clear information in there if you want, but really this is, aside from the door placarding piece, is something that we feel is going to be very beneficial for everybody so that we've got information in place of who to get a hold of if something goes wrong. Next slide. All right, Scott, you'll take this one away.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So one of the challenges that EHS has is that CPSO are in these great uniforms and they're very easy to identify. And the ones that don't carry firearms or or tasers are in very good uniforms as well, a nice polo shirt and easily identified. And the FPM staff are also easily identified with a PSU logoed shirt. But our EHS students and our EHS staff aren't always as easy to identify when we're in a space to check a safety equipment or pick up waste or do a lab audit. We typically have been wearing regular white lab coats that are issued from the chem stock room like everybody else. Well, I've recently found a way to get us some dark blue lab coats that are general purpose lab coats for our students and for our EHS staff who don't need to wear a high level of protection lab coat. So starting December 1st, maybe sooner if I can get them sooner, we'll be wearing dark blue lab coats. So if you see someone in a dark blue lab coat in a lab, they're either a student from EHS or a staff member of EHS, and they're in there to do something regulatory, something to do with lab safety, maybe a waste collection or a clean out of some kind. If you don't think that they're doing the right thing, please let me know. We need to know if we're causing a problem in the research lab, if we're getting in the way, if we're doing things too often, in your opinion. I want to engage the research community in that dialogue so that we help you understand why we're doing this and understand, maybe give you some guidance about ways we can do it better. If we come across a research in process sign, we will not enter, but especially early on, I will probably ask my team to let me know the room number so that I can reach out and confirm that the date and the times of that information that's on the placard and the door sign, I mean, is accurate. And also what kind of activity is going on to see if there's any other compliance needs that the lab might have. If the time is still inconvenient for the researcher, we will coordinate doing our eye wash and shower testing and our fume hood testing. Just so everybody knows, eye washes and showers are required to be tested monthly. Fume hoods are required to be tested annually. We have a little bit of flexibility because of that schedule, but sometimes we, especially toward the end of the month, we start to get into a need-based situation. So I'm going to be working hard to get our students on a little bit more of a regular schedule, to be front-loading the science buildings more so that they become our priority, or they've always been our priority, but they become more of a priority, and we emphasize getting them done at the researcher's convenience. And then we almost always can schedule regulatory inspections, but there are certain ones that we have no control over. And these are the ones: fire marshal, OSHA, and DEQ. They just show up. And so even with a research in process sign, we may have to violate our agreement of that if one of these regulators want entry into the lab space. I think it's going to be very rare, but it could happen. This is a picture of one of our staff members in a blue lab coat, just to show you what they look like. So there's been a lot of talk as we've been talking about the lab placarding and signage conversation over the last, year or so about not putting people's cell phone numbers out there. And I've been doing a lot of homework for my own call forwarding and communications since COVID-19 and before. There are two programs that I wanted to highlight. One is called Call Forwarding, or EC500, and the other is Google Voice. Call forwarding is a function that exists on our existing voice over internet phone systems. I am our department's telecom coordinator, but all of your departments have telecom coordinators as well. And if you want to turn on EC500, as it's called, which is call forwarding, it's free. All you have to do is turn it on for for your desk phone set. And when you do that, then you've activated it, then you can turn it on and turn it off at your desk phone anytime you want to. So you turn it on, you press a button, it turns it on, and then all of your calls will go to whatever number you've told the telecom people you want those phone numbers to go to, those phone calls to go to. When you don't want it to happen anymore, you can turn it off. It's indefinite. It happens forever as long as you keep it turned on. Now, the one caveat is when you make a phone call from the cell phone that it is tagged to, so my 725 phone number is tagged to my personal cell phone. If I make a phone call to any other 725 phone number from my cell phone, it will show up as if I'm at my desk. It's a little bit of a goofy thing, but that's how it works. So since COVID started, the Office of Information Technology has announced this Google Voice program. And it's a little bit the same, but it's also a little bit different. It goes through Google Voice, which if nobody is familiar with that, Google has these phone numbers that they'll issue out to people. And you can basically take the place of your phone desk set at your office with a Google Voice phone number. It took me about 4 weeks for them to get the process going and get all the nuts and bolts together. But now any phone call that comes to my desk comes to my cell phone through the Google Voice app. It also can show up on a computer or an iPad, a laptop, any kind of mobile device. You just have to have the Google Voice app turned on. And it doesn't cost you anything, but when you activate that, you lose your desk set, your phone set that's at your desk. You no longer have that. They take it away, and you don't have a hard-wired phone anymore. You have a Google Voice phone number that's out there in the ether. Some people wouldn't want that. Some people would. I personally didn't foresee losing my desk set, but I'm comfortable just having everything on my cell phone. And it didn't cost our department anything to do that, to be a guinea pig, so to speak. Here's some of the things that we plan on doing to help communicate all of the changes with lab placarding and the lab signage. First of all, we're going to be updating the undergraduate laboratory safety training that we have already in D2L, and it's going to have the new signage awareness in there so that early on in people's careers at Portland State, they learn that this is the new standard. And that undergraduate safety training is going to be updated very soon. And anybody who does have undergraduates in their science departments or in their teaching can invite them to take that. It's a voluntary training through D2L, and we're really trying to highlight that as a new function and hopefully make it required for all science undergraduates in the near future. The next one we're highlighting is the graduate student training. It's called Working Safely in the Lab training. It's the standard chemistry stockroom monthly training that's provided. The next one happens to be tomorrow. We're working with chemistry to make that a more expansive and multidimensional laboratory safety training. We're trying to make it cross to as many different disciplines as possible on campus and support all graduate students, research assistants, and laboratory workers. The intention of this is to be the standard training for all graduate students and research personnel on campus. And it will also include the new placard and signage details very soon. I'm not sure about tomorrow, but probably easily by the November training. The one thing that this training does better than the undergraduate training is it really highlights the next level of campus safety, emergency resources, personal protective equipment, reporting incidents and near misses, safety data sheets, labeling requirements, all kinds of different things, and for a variety of laboratory activities. Whereas the undergraduate safety training is the bare bones. This is the minimum requirement that we want someone in a research lab to have. Like, you must wear gloves, you must wear a lab coat, you need to have safety goggles. If that's all we get across to an undergraduate, we think that they can be pretty safe. We want the grad students to understand it at another level because of the amount of the quality and the amount of work that they do for our PIs and for our research endeavors. We're also, as a team, EHS is going to have training for our staff and extensive training for our student employees to get them up to speed as the December 1st deadline nears, and to start getting them used to seeing these signs and reporting them to me so that we can ease the difficulties that have been present for the last few years and also improve the communication. EHS is going to be coming up with a facilities and property management lab safety training that has these in it. We've been doing that for a number of years now, but this new version is going to include these placards and door signs and highlight what the differences are and how to recognize hazards and what to do when they see them. I also really am hopeful to get together with Campus Public Safety and renew our laboratory hazards training with them. It's been a little while since we've done that, and I'm excited to highlight some of the hazards in our science buildings for the CPSO folks, and it will also have the new signage stuff. We also have missed a few times with our relay resources stakeholders, and we're really interested in getting together with them and refreshing that relationship and getting them on board with these signs and what to do when they encounter them as well.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
From the RGS side, we will also be doing trainings with CPSO on animal care and use and IBC stuff so that they have a better idea of the regulations that we're dealing with on those as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Jason. So that is the presentation that we had prepared. I will stop sharing. I noticed quite a few questions and comments were coming in as we were going through all that. So if we have to pop over to a slide and I have to share screen again, Amy or whoever's fielding those questions, please let me know.
I can start. I'm going to start with Dave because I think Dave Payton slept through some of that. So, but he had a question of whether or not his NMR signs that are in SB1 are okay as they are, or are we going to redo those sorts of signs for high magnetic fields and stuff?
I think we would probably change them to universalize them, and we can work with Dave to come up with an icon or a logo or something to reflect magnetism, just like we've done with the other icons that we have.
Oh, we have one.
Oh, we do?
We have one.
There's a magnetism one? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dean was also asking, just I think wanting to clarify, we're not just marking things that are out and might be dangerous, but if it's in the room, like let's say if it's in the room and it's hydrofluoric acid or something like that, and it's stored properly, it's still marked on the door, because if there's an earthquake or if there's a disaster or something, people need to know what's in the space, even if it's right. So just clarifying that. Let's see here.
Just in case people weren't watching the screen, Jeff and I are nodding. The answer to that, Jason, is yes.
Good, good. And then Stedman wants to know if these blue lab coats that you guys are going to be wearing are the same as the chem stockroom lab coats.
Well, that's a tricky question. So the chem stockroom staff have what we call CR/FR coats, which are chemical retardant, fire retardant coats. And they also have just chemical retardant coats. And they have blue lab coats. We are getting blue lab coats, which are blue versions of the standard white lab coats. We are not paying for CRFR and putting our entire team in them, frankly, because they're $2.50 a week to rent them.
Gotcha. Okay, so they're just regular fabric that's been dyed blue.
Correct. If I could have gotten neon green to make them high vis, I would have. But
Okay.
they don't. They only supply them in dark blue, light blue, and white.
Got you. Okay. So I think at this point, I'd like to entertain any questions that people have. Are there things that aren't clear to you yet, or do you have concerns about the things that you've heard today? And like Mike Bartlett just asked about biosafety protocols and if those would need to be listed on the placard. I think you would probably just have the biohazard sign would be my guess. And then you're going to have a biosafety manual right inside the door anyway, right? Is that correct, Lindsay?
Yeah, so the BSL2 protocols will still have their special larger sign, but anyone who has an open BSL1 protocol will have the smaller just biohazard sign on the door placard.
Right. And you also asked about spaces that have 2 PIs. So for instance, I share a space with Brad Buckley, but we would need to work together because we want basically one sign per room, right? Or one, yeah, it's the room and not the person that's in it, correct?
Right.
Okay.
That's right. So in Mike's case, Anna Louise's sign would also have a radiation sticker on it.
Gotcha. We're going to have to work together. This will be tough. Faculty don't like to work together.
Well, fortunately, you have Lindsay and our team to help merge the sign requirements, so we'll help.
Gotcha. And Xavier, I see you there. Do you have any questions about how this might relate to creative spaces and other spaces in CODA?
I do. Thank you, Jason. It's always been a question. I'm part of the Chemical Hygiene Committee, and I've been involved with that group for many years. So this is helpful for me in the context of that group. But oftentimes, we're wondering if we fall through the cracks with research spaces. I've consulted my faculty, and there is some interest in using the creative spaces, what we call studios. But it's really not clear yet to what extent. But I know that our dean has pretty much locked down the art building, and there are certain procedures that we have to go through to get access. Right now we have limited access to very few students, but I thought that popping into this group I would learn more, and I have, of course, and will follow the outline as directed. So this is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I always wonder about, I mean, there's got to be lots of paint thinners and other solvents and stuff over in the...
There are, and today we did discuss the possibility of having classes in our printmaking lab in Shattuck Hall, but we are just beginning to discuss that. We're not ready to move in that direction yet. But if that percolates a little bit more, I will be contacting some of you to ask questions and see if we can do that, explore options. Thank you.
Great.
Jason, I saw Shankar had a question that I wanted to address. I'm sorry if we gave the impression to anybody that you need to have every chemical in the lab listed on your door sign. That is not at all what we want. We don't want it to be arduous like that. The list that's across the top are the global harmonization symbols that are found on a safety data sheet. So Shankar, in your case, if your lab has all of those different types of chemicals, then yes, you would have that entire row filled, but that's the most that you would have.
And also to clarify, we're not looking for an entire chemical inventory. We're just looking for the types of chemicals that could fall under those specific areas. As Scott mentioned, the Global Harmonization Program under OSHA, or the GHS, is a part of the university's hazard communication program. And that's how we train our facilities folks as well as CPSO on identifying and recognizing what the potential hazards may be. So if you have chemicals of a certain amount in those areas, you put that on list going, yep, I've got that, and we'll add that to the placard. But you do not need to list out all of the chemicals that you would have in your space, because I know some of those research spaces we would need most of the wall to complete that list. So just give us the general information and we'll supply it from there.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. I wonder, either Wu Chi or June, you're two people I noticed right away from engineering. I'm not as familiar with those buildings, but does this whole program sound like it's going to be able to be easily launched there?
I was going to send a message out to the researchers to find out. Like, I know we have some lasers, and I know we have some labs with chemicals and gases in them. Not to the level of class, but
You guys have rocket fuel. You have a rocket club. That's got to be dangerous.
I don't know if they have the fuel in the building or not.
They're not allowed to have the fuel in the building.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so I'm aware of like 2 labs with lasers and then, various chemicals. So I don't see any perceived problem. Like once we have the form, having people fill it out and getting the signage up. I'd probably get Don Mueller involved and have him do that.
Great. Will you make sure to make that connection with Jeff and the EHS group and everything?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Come on, two. You've got to have a question. You're always so talkative. I can't believe you haven't said anything yet.
Thank you, Jason. No, I'm just here to learn. Listen, thank you.
Good to see you.
Jason.
Yes.
I asked a question in the chat also with Annie. So if you've got a space like 425 in SRTC, where we've got external doors and internal doors with separate rooms, how are we going to do signage for that?
That's a great question. Oh, sorry, Jason.
I was just going to say, Scott, Jeff, Lindsay, you want to handle that?
Well, as far as I know, the outer doors, the weird wooden ones, there's no like placard on the outside of that, and that is just a service chase. It's not really a room. So I personally would be looking to the doors that are inside 425 into the A, B, C, D, E for the placards into those. That being said, I know that the -80s have the possibility of having stuff in them. So we can work with Annie and the sign shop and figure out a way to have placards put up on the outer doors. But I mean, it's really, getting it going is, I mean, we can find other examples of where it's going to be weird. That's going to be weird for sure. But yeah, we'll be able to work with you guys and get something put up.
Yeah, because there are a couple of chemicals in the corridor as well. There's a chemical cabinet, and very few, but just a couple of flammables.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a possibility of radiation on someone's cart being moved through there, and we'll have to discuss as a team if we want. I don't think we want to have the transitory things being identified. We want to have the things that are actually in the room, and so we'll be able to work with you guys about what's in there and get the appropriate signage put up.
I wonder, I just want to note that Lindsay put the link to the placard info collection form in the chat. And I also noticed that Mark Woods is listening in, although I can't see him. You're still the chair of the Chemical Hygiene Committee. Is that correct, Mark?
I am.
Well, while we're all here, do you want to talk a little bit about that and a little bit about high hazard work?
Oh, yeah, there was the high hazard thing. So when we first began returning to research, obviously we weren't very certain about how things were going to transpire. So we issued some guidance about working with highly hazardous chemicals. I'm trying to be careful not to define exactly what we're talking about, but the general guidance was to avoid doing this, because we were looking at trying to keep building density low, and particularly lab occupancy low. The context for the concern was that the general advice for campus is that you do not work with highly hazardous materials, or you do not work in laboratory spaces handling chemicals or hazardous chemicals alone. And so particularly when it comes to highly hazardous chemicals, you shouldn't be undertaking those procedures on your own. It's clear that we're going to be in these modified operations for longer than any of us hoped, and for longer now than we can perceive into the future. So it's necessary, in the interests of people being able to make progress, to revise our stance on highly hazardous chemicals. So we've produced some guidance. Lindsay, do we have it available somewhere? I forget where it ended up, but
the Word document on working with her, yeah.
We can distribute that if it's not available immediately. But basically the guidance is as follows. If you can avoid using highly hazardous materials, you should continue to do so. If there's an alternative, you should continue to do so. If, however, your work really requires the use of some highly hazardous materials, you should take the following procedures. You should ensure that there are 2 people in the laboratory when the material is being used. Those 2 people should be willing to work together and be in the lab at the same time. There should be no instances of coercion in order to ensure that this can happen. If nothing goes wrong, the 2 people will remain socially distanced, wearing masks. If something were to go wrong and there were an adverse event, it would be permissible to breach social distancing rules in order for person 2 to aid person 1, the person using the highly hazardous material. In addition to that, we need to keep in mind that building density is very low, which means that it will be very difficult to open the door and seek aid, because it could be a long time before anyone passes the laboratory door. For this reason, we want to ensure that the people conducting the experiment have a live video feed, a FaceTime, a Zoom, whatever works, to a person in the same building. So someone sitting in their office in the same building who can monitor progress, so that if there is an adverse event, they will be responsible for contacting emergency response. And the person inside the lab can render aid. Jeff, have I forgotten anything? Did that cover what we set out?
Sounds pretty good.
Mark, this sounds like the speech I gave my 17-year-old when I was talking with him about dating.
Yeah, I'm worried it'll have the same impact, Jason.
Sorry, couldn't help it. It sounded a lot like person A and person B. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think people get what we're saying. We're saying that we recognize that there are going to be instances where you have to do it. Please be very cognizant of the fact that that there may be, if something goes wrong, there may need to be a breaching of social distancing, but please make sure that you've set things up in such a way that there is somebody available to call for an emergency response, as well as somebody available to render emergency aid. Perfect.
Thanks, Mark.
And the high hazard, and this high hazard thing is something that we can help with. You know, if you have questions or you want to use something that poses a hazard, especially if you've never used it before, please reach out to me or Lindsay or both of us, and we're happy to help do the SDS research and figure out what the safest way to do it and how you can maintain social distancing and provide emergency help to anybody that's there.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. Looks like we're about ready to wrap up. Lindsay, you got
Oh, I just stuck a link to a copy of that document, so anyone who wants to look over what Mark was just talking about, I made it available to anyone with a PSU email address to review if they want it.
Thank you, Lindsay. And I want to thank you guys all for coming today and ask that if you can, spread the word. I was hoping to see more department chairs at this meeting. So if your department chair wasn't here, maybe you're their representative, but make sure you get this in front of them and tell everybody to be looking for the communications coming out. Fill out the placards. Jeff, you want to say something about that?
Well, actually, one last plug that I wanted to put in here. I know that Scott was highlighted the fact that we've got this great undergraduate safety training module that Lindsay put together through D2L. The chemistry stockroom has their laboratory safety training for the graduate level, kind of TA research assistant level. It is also something that we are looking at across campus, and some of those two modules may not have as dedicated information that, say, you would find in CODA or in art and design or somewhere else. And I know that even Uchi and myself and Richard Corsi are going to be talking more of a slightly different model for safety training available for engineers. It's something that we want to take advantage of this time. We're not running as many in-person classes. We're still all very, very busy, but once we get back to some level of new normalcy, we want to have continue to create a more robust safety training for our students so that they are ready and prepared when they walk into a lab or creative space to do whatever they're going to do as safe as possible. So I can't push that one enough, but if you have an interest in that, if you've got ideas that are floating around, please reach out to me. And I'd love to have a continued conversation to see what we can do to create a larger university-wide safety training for our undergraduate and graduate level students. And if you feel that there's something at the faculty level that needs to be done as well, we want to be able to support that process.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. All right. Thanks, everyone. Be on the lookout for communications about this. We'll figure out, they'll either come probably from EHS or from RGS. I don't know if we've decided on the exact communication plan yet, but for sure that'll be going to people that signed up for this and department chairs, and we'll try to get it broadly disseminated. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon. It's sunny out. Maybe you can get out and get a little tiny bit more sun before the rain sets in for the year.